The Grey King, Day 2, the Raven Boy. You see, Will said, it's the first quest without help for me, and the last, because this now is the raising of the last defense the light can build. To be ready. There is a great battle ahead, Bran. Not yet, but not far off. For the dark is rising to make its great attempt to take the world for itself until the end of time. When that happens, we must fight and we must win. But we can only win if we have the right weapons. That is what we have been doing, and are still, in such quests as this, gathering the weapons forged for us long, long ago. 6 enchanted signs of the light, a golden grail, a wonderful harp, a crystal sword. They are all achieved now but the harp and the sword, and I do not know what will be the manner of the sword's finding, but the quest for the harp is mine. He picked a sprig of gorse and sat staring at it. Out of a long time ago there were 3 verses made, he said, to tell me what to do. They aren't written down any more, though once they were. They are only in my mind, or at least they used to be forever, I thought. But then not long ago I was very ill, and when I came out of it the verses had gone. I'd forgotten them. I don't know if the dark had a hand in it. That's possible, while I was not myself. They couldn't have taken the words for themselves, but they could have managed to hinder my catching them again. I thought I'd go mad trying to remember. I didn't know what to do. A few bits came back, but not much. Not much, until I saw your dog. Kafal, Bran said. The dog raised his head. Kafal, those eyes of his, those silver eyes, it was as if they broke a spell. He had put me on the old way, Cadman's way, as well, just here, and I remembered. All the verses, everything. He is a special dog, Bran said. He is not ordinary. What are your verses? Will looked at him, opened his mouth, shut it again, and looked out at the mountains in confusion. The white-haired boy laughed. He said, I know, for all you can tell me. I might be from the dark in spite of Kafal. Isn't that it? Will shook his head. If you were from the dark, I should know very well. There's a sense that tells us. The trouble is that same particular sense that says you aren't from the dark doesn't say anything else about you either. Not a thing. Nothing bad, nothing good. I don't understand. Ah, Bran said mockingly. I have never understood that myself, but I can tell you. I am like Kafal. I am not quite ordinary either. He glanced at Will, the pale-lashed eyes darting, secretive. Then he said, reciting deliberately, sounding very sing-song Welsh, on the day of the dead, when the year 2 dies, must the youngest open the hills, through the door of the birds where the breeze breaks. Will sat stone-still, horrified, gazing at him. The land broke in waves. The sky was falling. He said huskily, the beginning of it. You can't know that. It's not impossible. There are only 3 people in the world who... He stopped. The white-haired boy said, I was up here with Kafal a week ago, up here where you never meet anybody, and we met an old man, a strange old man he was, with a lot of white hair and a big beaky nose. Will said slowly, Ah, he was not English, said Brand, and he was not Welsh either, though he spoke good Welsh, and good English too, for that matter. He must have been a Duin, a wizard. He knew a lot about me. He pulled the frond of Brocken, frowning, and began to pick it into pieces. A lot about me. Then he told me about the dark and the light. I have never heard anything that I believed so very much, right away without question. And he told me about you. He told me that it was my task to help you on your quest, but that, a mocking note slid again into the clear voice, perceptible just for an instant, but that because you would not trust me, I must learn those 3 lines for a sign. And so he taught me them. Will lifted his head to look up the valley, at the blue-gray hills, hazy in the sunshine, and he shivered. The sense of a looming shadow was on him again, like a dark cloud hovering. Then he said, shrugging it aside, speaking without strain of suspicion now, there are 3 verses, but the first 2 are the ones that matter, for now. The lines my master Merriman taught you come at the beginning. On the day of the dead, when the year 2 dies, must the youngest open the oldest hills, to the door of the birds where the breeze breaks. There fire shall fly from the raven boy, and the silver eyes that see the wind, and the light shall have the harp of gold. By the pleasant lake the sleepers lie, on Cadman's way where the kestrels call. Though grim from the grey king shadows fall, yet singing the golden harp shall guide, to break their sleep and bid them ride. He reached out and rubbed Kafal's ears. The silver eyes, he said. There was a silence, with only the distant skylark still trilling faintly in the air. Bran had listened without moving, his pale face intent. At length he said, Who is Merriman? The old man you met, of course, if you mean What is he? That's harder. Merriman is my master. He is the first of the old ones, and the strongest and the wisest. He'll have no part in this quest now, I think. Not in seeking. There are too many things for all of us to do, in too many places. Cadvan's way, it said in the verse. I remember he told me one other thing. He said Kafal would get you onto the way, so that the two things together, the place and Kafal himself, would be important. Then he said, and also the way for later. Later, so not yet, I suppose. Bran sighed. What does it all mean? For all his strangeness, it was the plaintive question of a very normal boy. I was thinking, Will said, that the Day of the Dead might be All Hallows Eve. Do you think Halloween when people used to believe all the ghosts walked? I know some who still believe they do, Bran said. Things like that last a long time up here. There is one old lady I know puts out food for the spirits at Halloween. She says they eat it too, though if you ask me, it's more likely the cats. She has 4 of them. Halloween will be this next Saturday, you know. Yes, Will said, I do know. Very close. Some people say that if you go and sit in the church porch till midnight on Halloween, you hear a voice calling out the names of everyone who will die in the next year. Bran grinned. I've never tried it. But Will was not smiling as he listened. He said thoughtfully, you just said, in the next year, and the verse says, on the Day of the Dead, when the year 2 dies. But that doesn't make sense. Halloween isn't the end of the year. Maybe once upon a time it used to be, Bran said. The end and the beginning both, once instead of December. In Welsh, Halloween is called Calan Gaeth. That means the first day of winter. Pretty warm for winter, of course. Mind you, nobody is going to get me to spend the night in St. Cadman's churchyard, however warm. I was there this morning at St. Cadman's. Will said, that was what put the name back into my head somehow, to come and look for the way. But now I have the verse, I must begin at the beginning. The hardest part, Bran said. He tugged off his school tie, rolled it up, and stuffed it into his trouser pocket. It says the youngest must open the oldest hills through the door of the birds, right? And you are the youngest of the old ones, and these are the oldest hills in Britain, for sure. These and the Scottish hills, but the door of the birds, that's hard. The birds have their holes and nests everywhere. The mountains are full of birds. Crows, kestrels, ravens, buzzards, plovers, wrens, wheatears, pipits, curlews. Lovely it is, listening to the curlews down on the marshes in spring. And look, there is a peregrine. He pointed upwards toward a dark speck in the clear blue sky, drifting lazily round in a great sweeping curve, far above their heads. How can you tell? A kestrel would be smaller. So would a merlin. It isn't a crow. It could be a buzzard. But I think it's a peregrine. You get to know them. They are so scarce now that you look more carefully. And I have a reason of my own, too, because peregrines like to bother ravens. And as he pointed out, I am the raven boy. Will studied him. The eyes were hidden again, behind the sunglasses, and the pale face, almost as pale as the hair, was expressionless. It must always be difficult to read this boy, Bran, to know properly what he is thinking or feeling. Yet here he was, part of the pattern, found by Merriman, Will's master, and now by Will, and described in a prophetic verse that had been made more than 1,000 years ago. He said experimentally, Bran? What? Nothing. I was just practicing. It's a funny name. I never heard it before. The only way it is funny is in that English voice of yours. It is not Bran like a breakfast cereal. It is a longer sounding. Bran, 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 said Will. Better. He squinted at Will over the top of the sunglasses. Is that a map sticking out of your pocket? Let's have it here a minute. Will handed it over, squatting on the hillside. Bran spread it on the rustling bracken. Now, he said, read out the names that I point to. Will peered obediently at the moving finger. He saw Tal, Lewin, Nid, Kessin, Samas, Lalirin, Ekideth, Afan, Defy, Ligribith. He read out aloud, laboriously, Talilin, Minid, Seaswind, Samses, Linrise, Ekileth, Afendifi, Langali Nin. Bran moaned softly. I was afraid of that. Well, said Will defensively, that's exactly what they look like. Oh, wait a minute. I remember Uncle David said you pronounce F like V, so that makes this one Avon Divvy. Divvy, said Bran, written in English. Dovey. Avon Dovey is the river Dovey, and that place over there is called Aberdith, which means the mouth of the dovey. Aberdovey. The Welsh Y is most like the English U in run or hunt. Mostly, said Will suspiciously. Well, sometimes it isn't. But you'd better stick to that for now. Look here. He fumbled inside his leather satchel and brought out a school notebook and pencil. He wrote, Minid Swiswin. Now that, he said, is pronounced Mundquint Kites Rice. Go on, say it. Will said it, peering incredulously at the spelling. 3 things here, said Bran, writing. He appeared to be enjoying himself. Double D is always a TH sound, but a soft sound, like in leather, not in Smith. Then C is always a hard sound in Welsh, like in cat. So is G, as a matter of fact. It's always G as in go, not G as in gentle. And the Welsh W is like the OO sound in pool, nearly always. So that's why Minid Fosun is pronounced Will said, but it ought to be UN at the end, not IN, because you said the Welsh Y was like you in run. Bran chuckled. There's a memory. Sorry, that's one of the times when it isn't. You'll just have to get used to them if you're going to say the places right. After all, you can't complain about us not being consistent, not when your old English is full of things like dough and through and thorough. Will took the pencil and copied the map. Samays and Legowin. Yeah, all right then, he said. If the C is hard, then it must be Chemais. Very good, Bran said. But a hard S, not soft. Said fast, it comes out chemist, like chemist, without the T. Will sighed, looking hard at his next sample. Hard G, and then the Y sound. So it's Legolinen. You're getting there, Bran said. All you have to learn now is the one sound most Englishmen can never manage. Open your mouth a little way and put the tip of your tongue against the back of your front teeth, as if you're just about to say, land. Will gave him a doubtful look, but did what he was told. Then he twitched his lips upwards and made a face like a rabbit. Stop it, said Bran, sputtering. Get educated, man. Now, while your tongue is there, blow around the sides of it, both sides at once. Will blew. That's right. Now say the word land, but give a little of a blow before you bring it out, like this. Flan, 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 said Will, feeling like a steam engine, and stopped in astonishment. Hey, that sounds Welsh. Pretty good, said Bran, critically. You'll have to practice. Actually, when a Welshman says it, his tongue isn't like that, and the whole sound comes out from the sides of his mouth. But that's no good for a size. So, you'll do all right. And if you get fed up with trying, you can take the other English way out and say LL like Thol. Enough, said Will, enough. Just try one more, Bran said. You wouldn't believe the way some people say this one. Well, yes, you would, because you did too. He wrote Mackinaleth. Will groaned and took a deep breath. Well, there's the Y and the double L. And the CH is sort of breathy, the way the Scots say lock. At the back of your throat, like. Why do you people make everything so complicated? Mackinaleth. 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 Not bad at all. But mine doesn't really sound like yours. Yours sounds better, like German. Octa, nocta. Will yelled suddenly at the top of his voice, and Kafal jumped up and barked, tail waving. Do you speak German? Good Lord, no. I heard that in some old film. Octon, Mechalith. Mechalith, said Bran. See, yours does sound wetter. Sploshier. I expect all Welsh babies dribble a lot. Get out of here, said Bran, and grabbed at him as Will dodged away. They ran down the mountain laughing, in a wild zigzag, with Kafal bounding joyously alongside. But halfway, Will stumbled and slowed down. Without warning, he felt giddy, his legs weak and unreliable. He staggered to a nearby wall and leaned against it, panting. Bran yelled cheerfully over his shoulder as he ran, satchel flying. Then he slowed, stopped, looked more carefully, and came back. Are you all right, then? I think so. Head hurts. It's my stupid legs, though. They give out too easily. I suppose I'm still getting better, really. I was ill for a while. I knew, and I ought to have remembered. Bran stood, fidgeting, cross with himself. Your friend, Mr. Merriman, said you'd been even more ill than anyone realized. But he wasn't there, Will said. Well, not that that means a thing, of course. Sit down, Bran said. Put your head down on your knees. I'm okay, really. Just have to get my breath back. We're very close to home, or we should be. Just a few 100 yards over that way. Bran scrambled up the high, dry stone wall to give himself a better view. But while he stood there, suddenly a great angry yell came from the other side of the wall, and the barking of dogs. Will saw Bran draw himself up tall and straight, where he stood on the wall, looking down haughtily. He heaved himself upright to peep over the slate-topped edge, past Bran's feet, and saw a man approaching at a half run, shouting and waving one arm angrily. In the other arm he carried what looked like a shotgun. When he came closer, he began calling to Bran in Welsh. Will did not recognize him at first, for he wore no hat, and the tousled head of raw red hair was unfamiliar. Then he saw that it was Caradog Pritchard. When the farmer paused for breath, Bran said clearly, pointedly, using English, "My dog does not chase sheep, Mr. Pritchard. And anyway, he is not on your land. He is over this side of the wall. I tell you that he is a rogue dog, and he has been worrying my sheep," Pritchard said furiously. His English was sibilant, heavily accented, thickened by rage. "Him and that dang black hound of John Rowland's. I will shoot them both if I catch them at it. You will be sure. You be sure I will. And you and your little English friend there had better keep off my land too, if you know what's good for you." The small eyes in his flushed, pudgy face glared maliciously at Will. Will said nothing. Bran did not move. He stood there, looking down at the angry farmer. He said softly, "Bad luck you would have if you shot Cafall, Caradog Pritchard." He ran one hand through his white hair, pushing it back in a gesture that seemed to Will oddly affected. "You want to look more closely at those sheep," Bran said, "before you go blaming dogs for what is fox's work." "Foxes," said Pritchard contemptuously. "I know a fox is killing when I see it, and I know a rogue dog too. Keep away from my land, both of you." But he was not meeting Bran's eyes now, nor looking at Will. He swung round without another word and strode off across the pasture, with his dogs trotting at his heels. Bran climbed down from the wall. "Bah!" he said. "Warning sheep. Cafall is a match for any working dog in this valley. He would never in the world go wild after any sheep, let alone on Caradog Pritchard's land." He looked at the vanishing Pritchard, then at Will, and smiled. It was a strange, sly smile. Will was not sure that he liked it. "You will find out," Bran said, "that people like him are a bit afraid of me, deep down. It's because I am albino, you see. White hair and funny eyes, and not much pigment in the skin. A bit of a freak, you might say." "I shouldn't," Will said mildly. "Maybe not," Bran said without much belief, acid in his tongue. "But it is said often enough at school, and outside too, by nice men like Mr. Pritchard. You see, all good Welshmen are dark of hair and dark of eyes, and the only fair-skinned creatures in Wales in the old days were the Tylwyth Teg, the old spirits, the little people. Anyone as far as me must have something to do with the Tylwyth Teg. Nobody believes in such things any more. Oh no, of course not. But in the middle of the winter night, when the wind is blowing dark and the old television is not on, I bet you half the people in this valley would not like to swear that I could not bring the evil eye on them." Will scratched his head. There was certainly something fidgety in the way that man looked at you when you said. He shook his shoulders like a dog coming out of water. He did not look at Bran. He disliked the shadows of crafty arrogance that this talking had put over the other boy's face. It was a pity. It shouldn't be necessary. One day he would take it away. He said, "Caradog Pritchard isn't dark. He has red hair, like carrots. His family is from Dinas Madwy way," Bran said. "His mother, anyway. There was supposed to be a whole tribe of villains up there once, all red-haired, real terrors. Anyway, there are still redheads come from Dinas today." "Would he really shoot Cafall?" "Yes," Bran said shortly. "Caradog Pritchard is very strange. There is a saying that anyone who spends the night alone up on Cader will come down next morning either a poet or mad. My father says that once he was young, Caradog Pritchard did spend the night alone up on Cader because he wanted to be a great bard. It can't have worked. Well, perhaps it worked in one way. He's not much of a poet, but he often acts as if he were more than a little bit mad." "What is Cader?" Bran stared at him. "Don't know much about Wales, do you? Cader Idris, over there." He pointed to the line of blue-gray peaks across the valley, one of the highest mountains in Wales. "You should know about Cader. After all, it comes in your own verse." Will frowned. "No, it doesn't." "Oh, yes. Not by name, no, but it's important in that second part. That's where he lives, you see, up on Cader. The Brennan Lwyd, the Grey King." Nobody else could feel it, Will knew. As far as outward appearances went, there was no reason why anybody should feel the least unease. The skies were a gentle light blue. The sun shone with an unseasonable warmth, so that Riz sat up on the tractor, barebacked, as he plowed the last stubbly fields, singing a clear tenor over the roar of the machine. The earth smelled clean. Yarrow and ragwort starred the hedgerows white and yellow, with the red berries of the hawthorn thick above them. The sweeping slopes where the valley began to rise were golden brown with bracken, dry as tinder in this strange Indian summer sun. Hazy on the horizon all around, the mountains lay like sleeping animals, their muted colors changing with every hour of the day, from brown to green to purple, and softly back again. Yet behind all this autumnal gentleness, as he roamed the fields and the gorse-starred mountain, Will could feel the tension mounting everywhere, advancing like a slow, relentless flood from the high peaks brooding over the end of the valley. Enmity was beginning to push at him, slowly but irresistibly. The pressure of malevolence was building up to the point where it could break and overwhelm him. Nobody else knew. Only the hidden senses of an old one could feel the working of the dark. Aunt Jen was delighted with the change in Will's appearance. "Look at you, only a few days, but you have color in your cheeks now, and if this sun goes on, you will be getting brown. I was writing to Alice last night. I said you wouldn't know him. He looks like a different boy. Very nice son, indeed," Will's Uncle David said, "but a little too much for this time of year, thank you. The pastures are getting dry, and the bracken on the mountain. We could do with a bit of rain now." "Hark at you," Aunt Jen said, laughing. "Rain is one thing we are never short of here." But still the sunny skies smiled, and Will went off with John Rowlands and his dogs to fetch a flock of yearling sheep that was to be wintered at Clwyd Farm. The hill farmer who owned them had already driven them down halfway to another farm at the head of the valley. As he looked at the milling off white chaos of woolly backs, bobbing and shoving, 80 or so lusty young ewes, bleating and baaing in ear-splitting chorus, Will could not imagine how they could possibly be brought intact to Clwyd, when just one sheep broke away from the rest and pranced sideways towards him, where he stood in the field. He could not persuade it back to its fellows, even by yelling and pushing, and whacking its broad woolly sides. "Bah!" said the sheep in a deep, stupid baritone, as if he had not been there, and it wandered off and began chewing at the hedge. Yet the instant that Tip, John Rowland's sheepdog, trotted purposely in its direction, the sheep turned dutifully round and bobbed back to the rest. Will could not see how John Rowlands communicated with his dogs. There were two, the dappled Tip, named for the splashes of white on his muzzle and the very end of his waving tail, and a bigger, more formidable-looking dog called Pen, with a black, long-haired coat and a crooked ear torn in some fight long ago. Rowlands needed to do no more than look at them, a smile creasing his lean brown face, with a soft word in Welsh, or a quick whistle, and they would be off on some complicated maneuver that the average man could have understood only after 10 minutes of detailed explanation. "Walk at the front," he called to Will through the deep, unnerving chorus of baas, as he opened the gate, and the sheep poured through into the road like milk. "Well, forward, to wave at any cars coming and stop them at the side." Will blinked in alarm. "But how do I keep the sheep back? They'll all run past me." John Rowland's grin flashed white in the dark Welsh face. "Don't worry, Pen will see to them." And so Pen did. It was as if he had a rope tied around the front of the herd of sheep to keep it in a neat, tight curve, trotting, darting, slinking on his belly, moving always forward, sometimes persuading an errant sheep in the right direction with a curt single bark. He kept them all moving obediently along the road, and Will, clutching the stick John Rowlands had given him, strode ahead, bursting with confident pride, feeling as if he had been a real shepherd since time began. They met only two cars, in fact, all the way down the valley road, but directing even those two to pull in beside the hedge was enough pleasure. With the sheep crowding by in a rippling gray flood, Will was enjoying his job so much that perhaps he thought afterwards he let his deeper watchfulness falter, for when the attack came he had no sense of warning at all. They were on a lonely part of the road, with barren moorland on one side of the road and dark tree-clad mountainside rising at the other. No fields were cultivated here. Bracken and rocks fringed the roadsides as if it were a track over the open mountain. Suddenly Will became aware of a change in the sound of the sheep behind him, a higher note of alarm in their bleating, a flurry of scuffling hooves. He thought at first that it must be John Rollins and Tip heading off a runway, but then he heard a sharp, piercing whistle that in a moment had Penn swinging round at the sheep, growling, barking, threatening them to stand to a standstill. And he heard John Rollins calling, "Will, quick, Will!" He ran back, skirting the frightened, bleeding sheep, then jerked to a halt. Halfway past the flock, at the edge of the road, there was a great splash of red at the throat of a single tottering animal, smaller than the rest. Will saw a flicker of movement in the bracken as some unseen creature fled. Away it went towards the mountain, and the fronds waved, and then they were still. Will watched horrified as the wounded sheep staggered sideways and fell. Its fellows pushed away from it, terrified. The dogs growled and threatened, frantically containing the herd, and Will heard John Rollins yelling and the thwacking of his stick against the hard road. He too yelled and waved his arms at the heaving flock of sheep, keeping them together as they tried in panic to break away over the moor, and gradually the nervous animals calmed and were still. John Rollins was bending over the injured ewe. Will shouted across the heaving backs, "Is it all right?" "Not much hurt. Missed the vein. We're lucky." Rollins bent down, heaved the inert sheep over his shoulders, and grasped its fore and hind feet separately, so that it hung across the back of his neck like a huge muffler. Grunting with effort, he slowly stood up. His neck and cheek were smeared red by the sheep's blood-stained fleece. Will came towards him. Was it a dog? Rollins could not move his head because of the sheep, but his bright eyes swiveled quickly round. "Did you see a dog?" "No." "Are you sure?" "I saw something running away through the bracken, but I couldn't tell what it was. I just thought it must be a dog. I mean, what else could it have been?" Rollins did not answer, but waved him ahead and whistled to the dogs. The flock began pouring on down the road. He walked at the side of it now, leaving the rear entirely to Tip. Neatly and efficiently the dog kept the sheep moving along. Soon they came to a deserted cottage, set back from the road, stone-walled and slate-roofed, sturdy-looking, but with the glass broken in its two small windows. John Rollins kicked open the heavy wooden door, staggered inside, and came out without the sheep, breathing heavily and wiping his face on his sleeve. He closed the door. "Be safe there until we can get back to her," he called to Will. "Not far now." Before long they were at Clwyd. Will opened the gate of the broad pasture where he knew the sheep were to be kept, and the dogs nudged and nagged them inside. For a few moments the sheep eddied about, bleating and muttering. Then they settled down to a greedy, rasping nibble of the lush grass. John Rollins fetched the Land Rover and took Will with him to collect the injured sheep. At the last moment the black dog Penn leapt up into the car and settled down between Will's feet. Will rubbed his silky ears. "It must have been a dog attacked that sheep, surely," he said as they drove off. Rollins sighed. "I hope not, but indeed I cannot think of any wild creature that would attack a flock with men and dogs alongside. But nothing but a wolf would do that, and there have been no wolves in Wales for 200 years or more." They drew up outside the cottage. Rollins turned the car so that its back door would be in easy reach, and went into the little stone building. He was out again almost at once, empty-handed, looking uneasily about him. "She's gone. Gone? There must be some sign of Penn. Some sign. Penn. Turd, you might." John Rollins went casting around outside the cottage, peering intently at grass and bracken and gorse, and the black dog wove its way around and about him, nose down. Will, too, peered hopefully, looking for flattened plants or signs of wool or blood. He saw nothing. A jagged rock of white quartz glittered before them in the sunshine. A woodlark sang. Then all at once Penn gave one short, sharp bark, and was off on a scent, trotting confidently head down through the grass. They followed, but Will was puzzled, and he could see the same bafflement on John Rollins' seamed face. For the dog was tracking through untouched grass, not a stem bent by the passing even of a small creature, let alone a sheep. There was the sound of water running somewhere ahead of them, and soon they came to a small stream flowing down towards the river, the jutting rocks in its course showing how much lower than usual it was running in the dry spell. Penn paused, cast up and down the stream unsuccessfully, and came to John Rollins whining. "He's lost it," the shepherd said. "Whatever it was, could have been no more than a rabbit, of course, though not too many rabbits I have heard tell of would have the sense to hide their trail in running water." Will said, "But what happened to the sheep? It was hurt. It couldn't have walked away, particularly through a closed door," Rollins said dryly. "That's right, of course. Do you think whatever animal attacked it would have been clever enough to come back and drag it away?" "Clever enough, perhaps," Rollins said, staring back at the cottage, "but not strong enough. A yearling will weigh about 100 pounds. I near broke my back carrying her a little way. You need a mighty big dog to drag that weight." Will heard himself say, "2 dogs?" John Rollins looked at him with narrowed eyes. "You have some unexpected ideas, Will. For one not brought up on a farm, yes, 2 dogs together could drag a sheep. But how would they do it without leaving a great flat trail? And anyway, how could 2 or 20 dogs open that door? Goodness knows, Will said. Well, perhaps it wasn't any animal. Perhaps somebody drove by and heard the sheep bleating and got it out of the cottage and took it away. I mean, they couldn't know we were coming back. Aye, John Rowland said. He did not sound convinced. Well, if any did that, we shall find the sheep at home when we get there, for it has the Pentreath mark on its ear, and any local man would know that we Winter Williams Pentreath's ewes. Come on now. He whistled the pen. They were silent on the drive home, each lost deep in concern and baffled conjecture. John Rowland, Will knew, was worrying over the need to find the sheep quickly, to doctor its wound. He, Will, had his own worries, although he had not mentioned it to Rowland, and hardly dared even to think that what it might mean. He knew that in the moment when the wounded sheep had staggered and fallen beside the flock, he had seen something more than that formless twitch of motion in the bracken where the attacker fled. He had seen the flash of a silvery body, and the muzzle of what looked very much like a white dog.